Nobody moved. Jake stood in the middle of the trail, the folded map hanging loosely from his hand. A few seconds earlier, he'd forced himself to smile. Now, there wasn't even a trace of confidence left on his face. His eyes drifted from the path ahead to the trees, then back to us. He was searching for an answer, any answer, but the forest wasn't offering one. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "We're turning around." His voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm people use when they're trying to keep everyone else from panicking. No one argued. There wasn't another option. If we'd somehow missed a turn, we'd find it on the way back. Jake slipped the map into his backpack and started walking. Emily followed without saying a word. Sarah hesitated for just a moment before falling in beside me. I took one last look at the trail ahead. It stretched between the pine trees until it disappeared into the distance. Perfectly still, perfectly empty. Then I turned around and followed the others. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The trail looked exactly the way I remembered it. Tall pines lined both sides of the path. Sunlight filtered through the branches overhead. A light breeze stirred the needles high above us. If someone had dropped me into that moment, without any memory of what had happened, I would have called it peaceful. But peace has a strange way of disappearing once fear settles into your mind. Every sound suddenly means something. Every shadow looks out of place. Every movement catches your eye. I kept glancing over my shoulder, not because I expected to see Noah, it because I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was walking behind us. Every time I looked, the trail was empty. Just trees, just silence, just that endless path disappearing into the forest. Jake checked his watch. 3:28. He frowned, then looked at it again. Emily noticed. "Something wrong?" Jake shook his head. "No," but he didn't sound convinced. "It's just—" He paused. "I could have sworn it was later." Nobody replied. Maybe because none of us wanted to admit we'd been thinking the same thing. It felt as though we'd been walking for much longer than a few minutes. Long enough that we should have reached the creek, or the old fallen tree, or at least one of the landmarks we'd passed earlier instead. Everything looked exactly the same. Pine trees, dirt trail, silence. Emily suddenly stopped. "Wait!" The rest of us turned. She was staring at the ground. Jake sighed. "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she crouched beside the trail and brushed her fingers across the damp soil. Then she looked up. "Where are our footprints?" For a moment, nobody understood what she meant. Jake frowned. "What?" Emily pointed behind us. "The ground. We've been walking on this trail for hours. There should be tracks everywhere." I looked back. The soil was soft, dark from the rain earlier that week. The kind of ground that recorded every step, but there was nothing. No boot prints, no scuffed dirt, no broken edges where our shoes had pressed into the mud. Nothing. The trail behind us looked untouched, as though nobody had walked there in days. Jake immediately shook his head. "We're on the wrong trail." He said it too quickly, almost as if he needed to believe it. Sarah slowly raised one hand. "No." She pointed toward a nearby pine tree. 3 fresh cuts marked the bark. Long, vertical, still leaking sap. Noah. He'd carved them earlier that afternoon with his pocket knife. I remembered laughing when Jake complained he was damaging the trees. Noah had grinned. Relax. If we get lost, you'll thank me. None of us had expected those scratches to become proof. Jake stared at the tree, then back at the empty ground. His expression changed. Not fear. Not yet. Confusion. The kind that comes when reality stops matching what your eyes are seeing. He stepped toward the tree, ran his fingers over the fresh cuts. The sap stuck to his fingertips. It was real. The tree was real. The trail was real. So why were the footprints gone? No one spoke, because none of us wanted to say. The only explanation left. Something was wrong with the forest, and whatever it wasn't finished with us. Jake wiped the sap against his pants. Keep moving. Nobody argued. We fell into line again. Jake in front, Emily just behind him, Sarah walking beside me, Noah bringing up the rear. The only sound was the steady crunch of boots against the dirt. No conversation, no laughter, just breathing. The forest seemed quieter than before, not silent, just listening. 10 minutes passed, at least. I thought they did. None of us checked our watches again. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what they would say. The trail continued exactly as it had before. Straight, flat, endless. Every pine tree looked almost identical to the last. The same rough bark, the same twisted roots, the same patches of emerald moss climbing the trucks. It became strangely difficult to remember whether we'd actually made progress, or if the forest simply wanted us to believe we had. Emily suddenly slowed. I don't remember this many dead branches. Nobody answered, because none of us knew. I looked upward. High above us, several broken limbs hung tangled between the trees. Had they always been there? I couldn't remember. That bothered me more than it should have. Jake stopped again. What now? Emily pointed ahead. I swear, that fallen log wasn't there. We all looked. A massive pine trunk lay across one side of the trail. Nothing unusual. Except, I couldn't remember stepping around it before. Jake frowned. We must have missed it. Sarah looked at him. Did we? Jake didn't answer. Instead, he climbed over the log. One by one, we followed. The air changed. Not colder, heavier, almost as though the forest itself had taken a slow breath. Even the breeze disappeared. The branches stopped moving. The leaves became perfectly still. I realized something. The silence wasn't natural anymore. There were no birds, no insects, no distant woodpeckers. Nothing. 5 people walking through a forest. Yet somehow, we had become the loudest things in it. Noah cleared his throat. I don't like this. It was the first thing he'd said in several minutes. No one laughed. Not even him. Jake glanced back. We're almost out. Noah looked ahead. How do you know? Jake hesitated, then looked away. I just do. It wasn't an answer. Everyone knew it. Another 5 minutes, maybe 10. Time had started feeling slippery, impossible to hold on to. Then, Sarah froze. So? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Jake stopped. What? She slowly pointed ahead. None of us spoke. About 50 yards away, the trail curved gently around a cluster of enormous pine trees. Standing beside the bend was a weathered wooden trail marker. The top had broken off years ago. One side leaned slightly to the left. A streak of faded red paint ran down its base. My stomach tightened. I'd seen it before. Every single one of us had. Jake whispered. No! Emily's face drained of color. That's... Noah finished the sentence for her. The same trail marker. Nobody moved. Because we all remembered exactly where we'd seen it. It was the marker we'd passed nearly 30 minutes ago. We hadn't turned around. We hadn't taken another path. We hadn't made a wrong turn. We had walked in a straight line the entire time. And somehow, the forest had brought us back to the exact same place. No one breathed. Not for what felt like an eternity. Jake stared at the weathered marker as if it had just spoken his name. His lips parted. Nothing came out. Emily slowly shook her head. No, barely a whisper. That's impossible. Sarah looked from the marker to the trail behind us, then back again. We walked for at least half an hour. I know, Jake answered. His voice sounded hollow. We never stopped. We never split up. We never changed direction. Noah swallowed hard. So how are we? He couldn't finish. None of us wanted to say the words, because saying them would make them real. Jake suddenly ripped the folded map from his backpack. The paper crackled violently in his hands. He spread it across the top of the trail marker. His fingers trembled. Black Ridge Trail, he muttered to himself. We started here. His finger traced the printed route. We crossed the creek. He moved farther, past the old ranger sign. Farther still. The fork, nothing. His hand froze. His eyes narrowed. He looked back toward the forest, then down at the map again. No! Emily stepped beside him. What? Jake looked up. The trail marker. What about it? It isn't supposed to exist here. Silence. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Jake jabbed his finger at the map. This marker should be almost 2 miles behind us. Nobody moved. Sarah stared at the paper. I don't understand. Jake folded the map shut. I don't either. For the first time since we'd entered the forest. Jake looked afraid. Not nervous. Not uncertain. Afraid. The expression spread through the rest of us. Like an infection. Our leader had finally run out of answers. Noah slowly reached into his jacket. I've got a compass. His voice carried a desperate optimism. Something simple. Something real. Something that couldn't lie. He unclipped the small brass compass from his pocket, flipped it open. The needle swung north, stopped. Everyone leaned closer. Jake nodded. Good. Noah held the compass level. North is... The needle twitched, then rotated slowly, deliberately. East, south, west, north again. It kept turning, round and round, without stopping. Emily frowned. You're moving it. I'm not. Hold it still. I am. The needle spun faster, a perfect circle, without hesitation, without settling. Jake took the compass, held it with both hands. The needle continued spinning, faster, faster, until it became nothing more than a silver blur. Nobody spoke, because everyone understood what that meant. The compass wasn't broken. The forest was. Jake suddenly backed away. No! He looked around wildly. This isn't possible! He pulled his phone from his pocket. No signal. He already knew. Then he opened the GPS app. The screen loaded. Loaded, loaded. A small blue dot appeared. For one brief second, hope returned. Then the map glitched. The blue dot jumped. 30 feet, 100 feet, half a mile. It skipped across the forest faster than the eye could follow. Then, the entire trail vanished. The screen turned blank. Nothing remained except a white grid. No roads, no trees, no terrain. Just an empty, white space. As if Black Ridge National Forest no longer existed, Jake stared at the screen. "What?" Emily leaned over his shoulder. "What does it say?" Jake swallowed. "It doesn't." A sharp crack echoed somewhere deep in the trees. Everyone spun toward the sound. Silence. Then another. Closer. A branch breaking. Slow. Measured. Not falling. Stepped on. Noah whispered. "Someone's out there." Nobody answered, because we'd all heard it. One step, then another. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. Always hidden behind the trees, never close enough to see, never far enough to ignore. It matched our pace. Whenever we stood still, it stopped. Whenever we moved, it moved. Watching, waiting, learning. Jake lowered his voice. "Don't run." Emily looked at him. "What? If something is following us?" He never finished, because the footsteps stopped. Completely. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Every pine tree stood perfectly still. The air refused to move. Even the sunlight, filtering through the branches, seemed frozen. It felt as though the entire forest had stopped breathing. Then, from somewhere behind us, a voice, quiet, calm, almost friendly. "You're going the wrong way." Every muscle in my body locked. The voice sounded human, close enough to touch, but it wasn't any of us. We turned toward the sound. There was no one there, only the endless rows of pine trees and the trail, stretching into the distance, waiting